This video is sponsored by RenderHub. Stick around to find out more about their RenderHub Reflection contest, which offers creators an amazing set of prizes, and of course their wonderful 3D art gallery and marketplace that contains tons of assets and resources for artists. The folks at Bentley has just recently announced the Plant Factory and View, which are amazing tools that you can use for creating landscapes and beautiful vegetations, and now totally free for everyone. This tool was previously owned by the folks at Eon, and Bentley did purchase it sometime in 2015, and they've been maintaining this amazing tool and using it for most of their projects. You can now get the Plant Factory totally for free. The 2023 version and the 2024 version of both Plant Factory and View are currently available for anyone to pick up, and we've just done a full detailed video on how you can get started with View, just in case you haven't tried that out. And today we're going to be taking a look at Plant Factory, which is an industry standard tool for creating trees and also vegetation. We'll talk about the basic way of creating, advanced way of creating, how you get to work with the geometry nodes, how you can create your very own custom tree models, the parameters and tools you should be aware of, how you get to create and attach fruits to your tree, simulate wind effect, exporting and bringing all of this into Blender, and finally we'll talk about a couple of interesting things that you might want to know about when working with a tool like this. And with that said, let's get right into it. So with Plant Factory open up right here, there's a couple of interesting things I would like you guys to know. First off, let's talk about the UI and how you can navigate across this. The very first thing which you'd notice is right here, we've got the geometry node section, which we're going to talk about. This is where most of the things actually happen. And to navigate across this is by simply using the right mouse button, and you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and zoom out. And of course, you can click and drag on any of this node to create more nodes. Over here is the viewport, and the viewport, how you access this is pretty simple. For you to navigate, you need to hold down Alt on the keyboard, left mouse button to orbit. If you hold down Alt on the keyboard and the right click, you can zoom in and zoom out. And for panning, if you hold down Alt on the keyboard with the middle mouse, you can do all of that. Right over here is where the properties exist. Right here is where you find the shading, all of the shaders, all the material stuff, they happen here. This is where you get to find the UV stuff and all of the unwrapping stuff. And right over here, we've got the tools and basically most of the things that you like to work with. These sections and also these sections, they deal with what you see within your viewport and how the viewport gets rendered. And for you to start creating things is extremely easy. And how you get started is by simply going over to the root. If you click and drag, you can add a simple segment. So to each of the segments that you add, they build based off it. So if we go in and say we'd like to add another child, what we're creating is a branch. And that's it. So we can have that and we can simply go over and say we want to make more, and right there we have more branches. And so to these branches, you can go in and even add way more stuff. So if I have this selected, instead of clicking and dragging, we can simply go over to Add Children and click on the Add Children, and then we can add a simple segment. And that way you can start adding way more cool stuff. You can control the length of these by simply going over to the node and playing with the length, and we can drag that down. We can have this selected. We can also go over to the segment, which has to do with this one, and we can drag that down. And that way we can start reducing this and chopping it down to size depending on what we would like to make. And this is just the gist of it. For those who like to throw in some, maybe some leaves, you can click, drag, go over to geometry, go all the way down here, and you can throw in leaves. So we have two types of leaves here. We have the cutout leaves and we have the default leaves. So you can throw in those leaves, you can double click right here, and you can simply double click again, and this will bring out a node where you can select the kind of leaf that you want. So if we like that, we can have that selected and we can click on OK, and right there we have those leaves. And this is like the very basic way of creating stuff. But what if you would like to create stuff based off pre-designed contents that currently exist? And how you do this is very easy. Actually, let's talk about one very cool stuff which I think you guys would love that has to do with the pen tool with this example. So if we click and drag, we can go over to geometry and we can go over to load components. So once we click on load components, there is a few components that you have here that you can work with. The folks at Bentley has also released a plant catalog, which I believe you can take full advantage of. So for you to start working with pre-designed content, what you can do is simply select the one you want. So let's say we'd like to have these already. We have it in the viewport, looking really cool. And what if you like to have more stuff? So let's just simply get rid of that. Click, drag, go all the way to geometry, add some content. And what if you like to have more stuff? Of course you can. So we can click on that as well and double click, and there we have it. And with this here, I gotta show you guys something. We can use the draw tool to simply draw out new branches. So we can draw out the new branch and you get the leaves. Of course, you can now customize these things. So we can also go ahead and click, drag, and we can customize that. So you can start customizing from pre-designed ones that comes with this and start creating. And this same tool also gives you access to create even way more cooler stuff. So what if you like to build stuff one after the other? And how you can do that with pre-designed stuff as well is to drag out the root, go over to geometry, go all the way down to load component, and you would see some trunks. So we can have a trunk selected, and right here we've got that trunk. So all the trunks that you find within the pre-designed stuff, they are made up of the advanced segment. So you remember when we started off, what we did was to click, drag, and we went to geometry, use the simple segment. This simple segment can be converted to an advanced segment. So once you click on convert to advanced segment, or you just simply switch it to advanced segment, you have way more options of things that you can do. If we set this to simple, take a look at the UV, that is what we get. But once we turn this to advanced, you would notice that we have even more cooler stuff going on there. The parameters are even more, and the options of what you can create are also as much as those. It's also worth mentioning that you also have one tiny cool tool here called the Add Advanced Growth. So we can add this, and we can go over to the intermode length, and we can increase that to create some sort of growth. And this way we can use this as also another basis to start creating stuff. For the buds as well, we can increase this and increase the buds, and this way we can start getting some more buds for this, you know, very typical cool stuff that you can work with. For those who like to throw in a bit of wind, of course you can also throw in a bit of wind right here, and you watch it simply animate. And these are also some very interesting stuff that you can start off right out of the bat to start creating with. But then let's talk about this cool stuff I keep mentioning, which is the advanced segment. So with the advanced segment, you can customize how you like your trees to be. So in this case, I'm simply going to go to the root, drag out, go over to geometry, add an advanced segment. Now with this segment here, there's a few things that we can do. So let's simply go ahead and take a look at some parameters. From this parameter section, we do have length, which controls the length. We can also play with the radius, which is currently inherent. And of course, we also have a few other things which we're also going to dive into. It's also worth mentioning that if you take a look down here, you would notice that we have something called section. Now from the section is where you can start customizing how you would like to build the tree trunk. So in this case, we do have the radius, and here we have the length, and from here there's a very tiny 3D view which you can use to preview what you're currently doing. What we can do is to add a loop. To each of this loop that we add, we can simply go in and start editing them. So you can also notice that we've got that loop right here, and within the section we can edit this to fit. So once we crank this all the way down and we simply click on the word apply, you would notice that automatically that adds up. And this is where some customization starts coming into play. So at a point like this, we can select the root and we can simply go ahead and make some modifications right there. And we can also add as much stuff as we want and also add some modifications. Now, if you look at what we're doing, we just have one simple node that controls the radius. If we would like to control other parts and probably add additional loops or maybe add additional sections, which we can use, we can click on any part and we can modify it. You would also notice that there are Bezier handles that we can also use to make some modifications. And this comes in really handy depending on what you want to do. So what we're going to do is do a simple speed ramp and create the kind of trunk that we would like to use as an example. And from there, we can proceed to talk about more things that you can do with the advanced segment. At any point in time that you're making any of this, you can simply go ahead and expand the window if you want to. It's also worth mentioning that if there are certain points that you like to get rid of, all you can do is simply select that point and press the delete key, and that would delete the loop that runs from the base all the way to the tip. And so once you're done, all you need to do is to click on apply and you have it. If you do download the plant catalog, you can load and you can also save whatever spline profile you've created previously. So once you have that, we can click on OK and then we have this going. Of course, we can go in and increase the radius if this is what we want. At this point, this is set to be inherent. So we can go ahead and set it to user defined. And from the user defined section, we can make changes. This is more like what you've got with graphs. However, you can increase this, so we can make this 5 and you notice the base becomes 5. And then this is responsible for more like the tip. So we can drop this to about, say, 2 for example, and we can set this to 0.5 for example. And you start seeing that we can set this to 1 And you can simply go to town with it depending on what you're trying to make. And of course, for those who like to see the wireframe of this, you can simply go over here and turn on the wireframe, and from there you can see it. Of course, you've also got this very interesting looking radius bar, which you can use to increase and reduce stuff going forward. If you're also thinking about dropping the subdivision, say for example you want something smaller, you can go over to edit, go right here where you've got subdivision and say subdivide less. And with this you can drop the subdivision of what you've got. But for the purposes of quality, we're simply going to keep this the way it is, and we can now start making some changes. Now, one of the changes I believe a lot of you guys may want to make is maybe deforming the entire tree. So by default, your trees don't look simply straight. They do move around some patterns, and that is where the axis control comes in. So from the axis control, we can click right here, and you'll notice that this is a full 3D stuff going on. So how we can explain this is literally this simple. If we go ahead and select one part and we move it around, watch what happens to our tree once we click on apply. That's it. So you notice it goes towards the angle. So what if we just want to work on one part and then we want to make it move this way and probably make this other one move that way, and click on apply, and there you have it. So we can use this to sort of control how the tree behaves. So once we are okay with this, can click on OK to get that going. But our roots don't have those flares that roots basically have, and for that we're going to click and have those root flares. I kind of think that we need a little bit of a work there, so I'm just simply going to go ahead, and that looks better. However, if you don't want to deal with the axis control, you can simply use the touch-up tool, which you can have access to from the menu bar, and from here you can make some changes. Of course, you can now go in and make those changes however you want, and depending on how you like to create your trunk, you do have options of doing this within your viewport, and this is looking super cool. That looks better. Okay, so once we have this going, we can now come through and start making some more decisions. So again, this is depending on what you want to make. We do have something called the tropism, and with the tropism, you can also control how the tree either folds down or how it stands erect towards the sun. So you sort of use this to control all of that stuff. You can also go in and play with the root flares that we've just seen. So right here, let's actually address this cap. So if we go over to the cap section has the cut and top. But of course, if you like the cut, or maybe you like the top alone, you can select that. Meanwhile, just like we mentioned about every other thing that you've got here, this also works as a profile. So we can create the kind of profile that we want for this. So we can go in here and make that decision. So I can actually bring this all the way down, and we can take this all the way up, and we now have that. Let's bring this all the way up here, and we can click on OK, and you've got that very, pointy looking edge right there at the top of the tree. And before we start talking about how you can add branches and also add a few other things, let's talk about one thing I believe a lot of you guys may want to know, and that has to do with customization. Can you import a custom geometry and use that as a skin for the trunk? Yes, you can. So at this point, if you go over to the segment, you can click down here, go over to imported geometry, and from there you can choose to import the geometry that you like to use. And this includes FBX, OBJ, Alembic, ZBrush object files, and also VOB, which are view files. So you can import that and use those as the segments that you would like to use when creating your trees. But for this case, we're simply going to stick to standard, as this is basically what we're going to be working with moving forward. Now for the branches, we can simply click, drag, go all the way to where we have the load component, and we can choose to load any of those branches. So if you like to load branches with leaf, of course you can simply select that, and there you have it. We've just loaded a branch with leaves. And from here we can use the pen tool like we already mentioned, and we can draw out various things, and this is very pretty, and it is quite easy how you can now work with it. So you do have options like so, and you can simply go to town with it and do some very interesting stuff. So let's go in and add just one more right about a point like so. Okay, so now that we have this, we can now turn on that wind. So because we have the leaves now, it is going to be visible what the wind looks like. So we can turn on that wind, and we can go ahead, play with this, and get some things going. And this is with you trying to create the branches based off a predefined branch that already exists. And again, if you simply go ahead and get the catalog, which the folks at Bentley has released, you can get even more stuff. And one thing which I also need to mention is any tree that you get to create by yourself, you can resell. But any tree that comes with a catalog, which you can go ahead and download, which they've also given up for free, you cannot resell that. But for sure, if you do create yours like we're creating this custom one, you can choose to resell it if you want and, make some incentive out of it. So how do you now create your own custom branches? Now for your custom branches, I will start off by saying you can just go ahead, select the pen tool, click and drag out, right? That easy, you can start creating stuff. But then if we choose to create like this, we would have to do this for every single part. So now we might want to go in there, make something like so, make something like that. And maybe this isn't what we want, right? Maybe we want to create just one part and then it's a node tree. We may want to make some more modifications over time. And how we can do that is also pretty easy, to be honest. And what we're going to do is exactly the same thing we did for the trunk. So we can go in and drop the length. And then from here, we can choose to drop the radius. So the radius is also one very important part that we might want to drop down. As you would notice, we have a very nice blending going on here. And for those who might be wondering about this blending is coming from where we have the meshing. So this meshing is very responsible for the kind of blending we're having. And from here, we can simply go the way back and do more stuff. So for this radius, I think we should drop this at 30, and we can also play with the tropism if we want. So we did look at the tropism earlier. You can also go ahead and play with that. And if you're also wondering about the tip, probably it's a bit too much. We can go to that section, add that extra loop, and we can take this all the way to the edge, drop this down. And from here, we can now create the exact kind of branch tip that we want. So you do have all of these options, and you can simply choose to play with these options and get some very interesting results. So what we would want to do is, instead of creating multiple, we may want to use a for loop node, which in this case comes as a repeat node. So you can right click to get more of those nodes. And in this case, we can simply go over and go to the loop, click on the repeat, and we would link this first one to this other one. So the next thing which we're going to do is to click and drag. So instead of having a new child for the geometry, all of this, we can just go over here and we can select next. And once we have this, we can go back to the repeat and we can repeat this by 2, 3, 4, depending on what we want. So if I say we would like this to be by 2, you would notice that we have 2 of those. And whatever that we have going on here is technically what will be repeated. So we can now go in with our pen tool and we can click and drag and we can create more stuff. So we can do that. And so with what we have here, we do have a ton of things going on. So what I would suggest you do, if you want to customize how these actually represent, you can simply go ahead and select the touch-up tool. So the same touch-up tool that we used in making edits to the trunk itself, yeah, you can use the same touch-up tool and also edit these individual branches. So there is also another thing you would notice, and it is quite simple, that some of these branches are colored yellow. Now the reason why they're colored yellow is because they are not properly blended, and it can mean one of two things. It's either it's not having enough size so it could blend with this, or we're not having enough subdivision on the main tree itself. So to solve one of these problems is by simply using the touch-up tool, and right here we're going to scale this. So I'm just simply going to go in, have that selected, scale this all the way up, and we would also play with this, and let's actually make sure that we have it slightly aligned all the way down. That seems to be a bit too thick. And for other parts like this, we can also go ahead and do the same thing. And of course, if you try to get the scale in and it's not working, you can always go in, simply go over here and take out the nodes that you don't want to keep. So what we have here, I'm just going to increase the length about a tad, like so. So you notice that we have these segments being repeated just 2 times. And so what it is doing is just repeating this twice. If we would like to repeat this even more and probably create that very crazy branch that we've always wanted to have when we create trees, we can. So to do that, I'm just simply going to dial the number 3. So you remember where we dial 2, we dial 3 this time. If you want to make even way more, we can dial this by 4, and this just starts creating multiple rippling branches. So we can go back to that segment which we created earlier, go back here, and from here we can choose how we would like the initial radius to be. And once we start increasing this, I want you to notice how much of a heavy tree branch that we are making. So the more you increase this repeat node, the more iterations of branches that you make. So you can simply go to town and make this stuff and get even way more stuff going for you. So there's a lot of nice and cool things that you can also do, which includes pruning. So the pruning can be done by simply selecting the pruning tool, and you can go ahead and chop things to size exactly how you want them. Of course, you can also choose to prune if you have the segment selected and you go over to the next node. Right over there, you would also be able to find a pruning parameter which you can use to select how you like to prune some of these things. And for those who like to play with the tropism, probably you want to make a few, variations here and there. These are also available, and you can also go ahead and work with those. So right over here, we have the segment, and you could choose to do a few nesting. So in this case, we can do a simple copy and paste right there. So let's just copy this node, paste that node right there, and we can connect it right over to this one. We can connect this right up to this node, so it sort of gets this. And right now you would notice we're having a different variation. So if I simply go ahead and wire this up, you would notice we have a different variation. And if we go in and wire this up, you'd notice we're having a different variation. In between these, we can throw a simple repeat node. So I can throw in that repeat node right in here. Let's allow that calculate, and we can connect that repeat node right into this one. So what we want to do in this sense is we would like this repeat node to repeat only by 2. And then we would want this other repeat node to repeat by, say, 3. And that way we would not have extremely slim looking stuff, but maybe a bit more visible. So we can use this segment to control these other segments, while this segment controls the bulk of it right here. So you can, mix these things however you choose and create interesting stuff for yourself. And for sure, if you like to make variations, you can. So you see how we've made all of this stuff? We can choose to make variations. And to make these variations is very simple. All you need to do is just go over here and click on make variation. And this is going to make variations of this particular stuff that you've created. So you can get as many variations as you want. And it's pretty interesting the kind of result that this creates for you. So you can, just go to town with these variations. And finally, we can choose to throw in leaves. So to add those leaves in there, we can simply go ahead and drag out, go over to geometry, and we've got 2 different kinds of leaves. So we can choose to throw in the simple leaf or the cutout leaf. So the simple leaf itself just gives you cards, and then you can simply go ahead and throw in new textures by simply double clicking, going over to the texture, selecting the texture that fits, clicking OK, and now you have those. Or you can go ahead and add up the other kind of leaves. So we can go over to geometry, go over to where we have leaf, use the cutout leaf, and now we have cutout leaves that have some form of subdivision as well. More so, you can also go over to geometry and load the components that also comes with it. In this case, we can simply go over to the leaf section and select any of these ones. And right there, we now have leaves every single place on our tree. And with this, we have just successfully created it. And for those who are thinking about, okay, what about, textures and all? You can create your textures by simply going over here. They've got a couple of interesting textures that are now here. So you can simply double click, go over to where we have the trunk. That should be the back. So go over to where we have the back, and we can select whatever one that we think actually fits. So we can do that. And I think we can go in and select something like so, maybe a cypress tree, something like that. So we can have that, and you can see how cool these things are. And, for the other leaves that we talked about, you can actually go in and reduce the size of the leaf. But, just to save time, I would suggest you play with some of the preset ones that currently exist, and you can start making cool stuff for yourself. To test out if the wind works with this, of course we can. So we can throw in that wind, and there you go. And you might have also noticed something right here. So these are like the level of details. So depending on the level of detail you like to get on individual stuff, you can simply go ahead and crank that up. What about fruits? Say for example, you like to add fruits to your scene. How you can do this is very simple. So there's a couple of rules if you're trying to bring in your very own custom fruits. So one of them is this, that if, for example, like right here we are in Blender, you need to make the models to be all quads. They are not supposed to be triangulated by any form. So if you try to import these things as, you know, what they are right now, you would notice that there is an error, which isn't something you like to do with. So the best case is just simply find a way to get rid of those triangles, and then you can go in and import it. So once you import them, they're very, very large files. So once you import them, they will be everywhere. So what I would suggest you do is right here, you can simply have the segment selected, go over to where you have the object, and from here you can play with the number. So we already have like fixed number. So if we crank this all the way to say, 1.2, it's a lot. If we set this to 10, it becomes way too much because this isn't what we really want to have. So I'm just simply going to dial this back to say 1.5, and then we're going to get the numbers reduced to about something pretty reasonable. And even with that done, there are certain parameters that I think might also be respected in this regard. So the size also matters. Okay, yeah. So size matters in this case, really. So in this case, you have to turn down the global scale just to be able to get something that is pretty decent, because, if it's way too big, it might not necessarily be something that you would essentially want to deal with. Other things you would notice is right over here, you've got the material, and you can go ahead and find some textures that you might want to apply to this. And I'm just going to, freestyle this one here and say, for example, this is going to be like the fruits that we have here. And we would go ahead and connect the leaves right onto the original segment that we have. So in this case, we've successfully added fruits, and we now have our amazing looking tree. Of course, if you like to simulate this will properly simulate, and of course you would notice that we don't have the object simulating, and the reason is because within the object section we don't have wind turned on. So once we have wind turned on and we click on OK, this is going to process it, and once it's done, we can now have this sort of simulate alongside with the leaves as the leaves simulate as well. And of course, if you like to export this, you can easily export this to any DCC app of choice. So if we simply go over to File, go all the way to Export, we can export this as a mesh, or we can send this to View. And for those who haven't seen the video where we talked about how you can work with View, I'm going to link that in the description so you can see how that works. So what we've done is to make a couple of variations, and finally we imported these into Blender. Now, for those who would be wondering, what are these things that are poking out? How you export stuff that are fully animated is this. That if you go over to the file section, you go over to the export, you have to say you would like to export these as animation, and you need to select animated bones. So you can set how much frames, and you can set it if you want it to be cyclic or not. And once you're ready, you can hit the export button and export it. And that's basically how we got this exported. Another thing which I mentioned earlier is to each of these models that you pick up, you can simply create a rig with them. So you can make rigs out of this. It is going to translate all the way to the other ones. And of course, if you like to make rigs for this other section, you can also go ahead and do it. So right here in Blender, once we go in and let's bounce this all the way back and press the playback button, this begins to animate just like we have inside of Plant Factory. And to render this is pretty simple. So what we've done is just add a couple of lights here and there, and then we place the plane, set this all the way to cycles, and then once you hit the render button, you'll be able to see what you've got. And this is what we have right here. So it's looking pretty, and of course we can definitely just go ahead and turn off all of this and still have our nice looking render tree right here. And you can see all of the textures for the leaves, the fruit, and also the back of the tree right here, and you can simply go ahead and work with it. There's also one other thing I think I need to mention to you guys, which might be super useful, and of course these are now additional stuff. First off, you can make changes to this. Of course, you can now drag out these panels if you want to individual nodes that you have. There are now colors, so you can simply use this color settings to change the colors, and this would be really useful if you like to indicate what color you're working with. This wasn't the feature that was available Plant Factory previously, but with 2024 it is now here. Another thing that you might also find very interesting is if we simply go over to file, go all the way to open, we can open flowers, we can open for grasses, we can open, you know, objects. All of these are available inside of Plant Factory, and you can simply just pick them apart if you want. If you're looking for things that you can just draw from scratch, of course you can. And from here you can start drawing, so you can draw out the trees however you want. So maybe you like to draw these, of course you can. So you can now take advantage of all of these and, you know, make those very beautiful images that you want. So if you want to bring in flowers, you can also bring in flowers. You can click right here, you can open up these flowers if you want, and you can study these flowers to see what actually makes them up. So just in case you're trying to create your own flower bundle or maybe your own leaf bundle, this I believe will help you get going really quick. And of course this has a couple of example files that you can explore and start creating some impressive things with. So this is it. All of the tutorial files are right here, and of course if you're looking for more stuff that you can learn from these folks, you can go ahead and check it out. So for those who like to use this, you can simply go ahead and download it. It doesn't cost too much to actually run on your PC, and you can use this to start generating or making some trees that you can use on your project or probably sell and make some incentive off. And speaking about selling or buying stuff, you may want to consider checking out the folks at Render Hub, as they currently have an interesting contest which is going on, and this is tagged Reflections. This is running from now till the 31st of July 2024. So for those who like to join this contest and also win amazing prizes, this might just be the right time for you to get in. There are certain terms and conditions that simply applies to this, and for those who like to find out more about it, links to this is going to be in the description, so do well to check it out. And of course if you're looking for more 3D content, they have a ton of 3D content that you can find on their platform, and of course an impressive 3D gallery, as this gallery covers a ton of things that can inspire you to get started, and you can find a wide range of works that are being made by creators and posted on this platform for everyone to get inspired from. And of course if you're looking for textures, materials, brushes, references, stock footages, HDRI, sound effects, and so on and so forth, Render Hub caters to all of these, and you definitely find it worth it. And again, for those who like to join this contest, links to all of this will be in the description, so do well to check it out. And of course a huge shout out to the folks at Render Hub for making this possible. Tell me what you guys think about this one in the comment section, and of course if you like this video or you learned something from this, you can go ahead and give a like, and don't forget to share with a friend. Until I see you guys in the next one, peace.